When I bought my new house in Pinebrook Hollow, I was looking for quiet, privacy, and a little distance from the chaos of my job, a job that most people couldn't begin to understand and would never know I held. The neighborhood, tucked neatly between a patch of thick woods and a meandering suburban road, looked like the kind of place that belonged on the front of a lifestyle magazine. Pastel-colored homes with identical picket fences, sculpted hedges, and mailboxes that all looked like they were cut from the same mold. I just wrapped a 6-year assignment with the NSA, most of it spent in cybersecurity counterintelligence, and though I wasn't retired, I had earned a stateside posting that gave me some breathing room, a job that involved remote work, red team auditing, and cyber threat simulations that were classified so deep you'd need an act of Congress to see them. As far as the outside world knew, I was a consultant. I liked it that way. And for the first few days in Pinebrook Hollow, everything seemed fine, almost too perfect. My house was positioned on a corner lot with a full privacy fence and a detached garage, exactly how I liked it. Easy to defend, hard to snoop on. But then came the first letter. Typed, not handwritten, and unsigned. It was slipped under my door one morning, not mailed, not taped, just tucked neatly under the entrance mat like someone wanted to leave it quietly. Dear homeowner, it read, we noticed that your blinds were left closed for 3 consecutive days. This is not in the spirit of our community's openness and welcome. Please ensure more visibility for the sake of neighborhood cohesion. I had to read it twice. Not only was it absurdly invasive, it was practically an admission that someone was actively watching me, counting how many days I kept my blinds closed. That was beyond nosy. That was surveillance-level fixation. I tossed the letter aside and ignored it. A few days later, I found another note, this one taped to my trash bin. Garbage bins must be placed facing east toward the street and not west toward the fence line. Repeat violations may result in HOA sanctions. My bin was turned maybe 30 degrees in the wrong direction. At this point, I assumed it was just overzealous rule enforcement. But then I noticed the glances. Whenever I stepped outside, early in the morning to jog, late at night to grab the mail, I caught at least one person peeking through their blinds. Some would duck away when I made eye contact. Others just stared. Once, while mowing the lawn, I noticed a silver SUV parked across the street, engine idling, driver inside pretending to look at his phone, but never leaving. It wasn't paranoia. I've done surveillance. I've trained people to do surveillance. These weren't accidents. Then came Karen. She introduced herself the way a school principal might introduce themselves to a transfer student they already hated. I'm Karen Hollings, she said, wearing a pressed pink blouse and holding a clipboard like it was an extension of her body. I'm the president of the Pinebrook Hollow HOA. Her smile was all teeth, and none of it touched her eyes. We like things orderly here. I kept my smile polite. I'm a fan of order. I'm sure you are, she replied, pausing just a second too long, eyes flicking over my front door, the security cameras, the reinforced storm door, the doorbell system I'd custom rigged with an encrypted sensor. And your work? What is it you do again? I'm a consultant. Oh. Her voice lilted up, like a bird taking flight. What kind of consulting? Security, I said simply. Mostly digital. Her smile flickered, just for a split second. And then came a nod. Well, I hope you don't bring too much of work home. This is a peaceful neighborhood. There was something in her voice I couldn't quite place. Not a threat, but close. I nodded. Noted. After she left, I checked my cameras. She'd approached the house 5 minutes before ringing the bell. Just enough time to take pictures. I checked the logs. She'd been on the lawn for 97 seconds before she even knocked. I went back to reviewing my security system settings. I didn't like what I was feeling, not yet full alarm, but an itch. A prickling tension at the base of my skull that told me I was being watched. Days passed. Then weeks. The letters continued, complaints about the brand of light bulbs in my porch fixture, about my overly tinted windows, about how long my sprinklers ran. None of them were signed. All of them were delivered by hand. I installed a motion-triggered camera above the door, hidden inside the porch light housing. Within 48 hours, I caught Karen dressed in jogging clothes and wearing gloves, slipping a note under the mat before speed walking away like she was on a mission. I didn't confront her. Not yet. One night, I left my house to get some air. My usual routine was to walk to the end of the block and back, stay off the main road, avoid being visible from too many windows. As I passed Karen's house, I noticed her porch light flicker off again. Deliberate. A signal. I slowed my pace. Her blinds shifted. I counted 5 seconds before the movement stopped. Someone had been watching me. Back home, I triple-checked my locks. Reviewed all camera feeds. Nothing new, until I noticed something on the hallway cam. A flicker of light in the backyard. Not motion from inside, light from outside, reflected through the slats of the fence. Flashlight. I didn't call the police. I didn't need to. I was going to handle this myself. Because what the HOA didn't know, what Karen was about to learn the hard way, was that I didn't just work in cybersecurity. I was trained by the best surveillance agency in the world. And Pinebrook Hollow was about to become my testing ground. Once I made the decision to treat my seemingly peaceful suburban life like an active intelligence op, everything changed. I stopped viewing Pinebrook Hollow as a neighborhood and began analyzing it like a network. Every house a node, every sidewalk a pathway, every neighbor a potential hostile. In my world, surveillance doesn't start with cameras. It starts with patterns. And Karen and her HOA goons were anything but subtle once you knew what to look for. The first red flag was subtle enough to fool most people. My front porch light flickered once every night at exactly 2:16 a.m. for 3 nights in a row. I had installed that light myself. Military-grade LED filament, hardwired with a redundant capacitor and surge protection. There was no electrical reason it should flicker. The only explanation? Interference. That's when I swept my exterior with an EMF scanner. It lit up like a Christmas tree near the flower bed. I dug through the mulch carefully, and sure enough, buried near the sprinkler head was a small, unauthorized wireless camera, no larger than a cigarette lighter. Its power source was a tiny solar strip camouflaged against the dark stone edging. It was broadcasting on a scrambled local band, encrypted, but not professionally. Amateur. DIY surveillance. I took it apart in minutes and ran it through my signal decoder. The MAC address? Registered to a Wi-Fi access point at Karen's address. The gall of these people. I didn't remove the device completely. I reconnected it, but rerouted the feed through a virtual loop, using my own software to feed false footage into their stream. That way, they think I was still moving about normally, while I did my real work in the shadows. The second sign was even more invasive. Someone had been inside my house. I hadn't been able to prove it until I left a small trap. I taped a single black thread across the bottom edge of my kitchen window, so thin it was invisible unless you knew it was there. I went out for a late coffee. When I came back, the thread was broken. Nothing else was disturbed. No fingerprints, no forced entry. But someone had been inside. That same night, I ran a full spectrum scan through my own laptop. There it was again, an open port handshake, not one I'd authorized, pinging from a nearby network, likely piggybacking on the public street Wi-Fi. Whoever was doing this had no idea I could see them. So I decided it was time to test just how far they'd go. I installed a mock server on an unused tablet. It looked like a real access point, but was actually a honeypot, programmed to simulate a rich database of personal information, tax records, classified-looking files, and folder names like secure_encrypt/NS_briefings. Then I connected it to my home network and left it on my dining room table, within view of a window. Sure enough, 2 days later, it was accessed. But they didn't steal the files, they tried to copy them. And when they did, I logged everything. Device serial, OSIP masking method, failed attempts to decode the encryption, even a screenshot of their device's internal timestamp. That timestamp matched a specific user login to the HOA portal the night before. The user? K. Hollings, Karen. She wasn't just harassing me. She was spying on me digitally and physically. I started noticing other oddities. My smart thermostat began resetting at 3 a.m. sharp, meaning someone was remotely pinging it, likely through a compromised link. My mailbox started showing signs of forced manipulation. Nothing was stolen, but envelopes were subtly sliced and retaped. Once I found a small scratch on the side of my interior hallway door, just above the knob, exactly where someone might rest a tool while picking a lock. This wasn't just HOA overreach. This was an operation. But it was amateur hour. Sloppy, without layering or proper obfuscation. I'd seen foreign espionage units do better jobs with half the resources. These people didn't know what they were doing. But they had no fear because they thought I was just another regular guy. So I decided to turn up the pressure. I planted a fake NSA visitor badge on my kitchen counter, right next to my fake tablet, visible through the same window I knew they were using. The badge had a blinking RFID chip and a mock name tag with a fake clearance level. I even added a small whiteboard behind it, scribbled with acronyms like SIGINT pipelines and classified routing nodes. 2 days later, I noticed a new tale. An old man pretending to walk a dog, except the leash was too tight and the dog was clearly not his. The guy walked past my house 6 times in a 30-minute span, and every time he lingered at my mailbox. He wasn't an HOA board member, but someone had brought in extra help. Karen was recruiting, and she was escalating. I checked her property online and pulled up satellite images from 6 months ago versus current ones. She had installed a new antenna on her roof. Not a dish, but a directional receiver, likely for signal boosting. Not something the average homeowner installs unless they're doing wide-range eavesdropping. She was investing in this, so I made a decision. It was time to set the ultimate trap, because if they wanted to spy on someone with NSA clearance, they were about to find out what that really meant. Once I decided to take the gloves off, I treated the situation like any other domestic counter-surveillance op. The first step was deploying layer detection protocols, a series of internal and external traps disguised as everyday tech but armed with data harvesting tools capable of identifying, logging, and pinging unauthorized access attempts. I began with a house perimeter, setting up what I called friendly decoys, faux vulnerabilities designed to attract attention. For example, I reprogrammed my garage door control panel to simulate a weak Bluetooth signal, just weak enough that someone with a signal sniffer would believe it could be spoofed. Behind that was a biometric trap. Any attempt to interact with it sent me an encrypted alert with GPS coordinates, timestamp, and the device signature used to probe it. Within 24 hours of setup, the trap was triggered twice. From those pings alone, I identified 2 devices. One was a cheap Android burner phone that matched a device Karen was spotted using at the last HOA meeting. The other, a generic laptop MAC address that, once cross-referenced, aligned with the Pinebrook Hollow HOA's IP subnet. I captured and mirrored the packets. They weren't even using a VPN, rookie mistake. Next, I upgraded the internal perimeter. Every room in my house was now outfitted with nano-audio detectors, mic-level sensors that could identify specific frequencies emitted by listening devices, even if they weren't actively transmitting. I also used a thermal imager to scan for temperature inconsistencies behind electrical outlets, vents, and even light fixtures, common hiding spots for covert gear. And wouldn't you know it? In the guest bedroom, inside a decorative wall sconce that had been gifted to me by a neighbor during move-in week, I found it a tiny directional mic, low-powered but potent enough to catch conversations. It had a weak onboard battery, solar rechargeable, and a near-field transmitter that was logging sound and offloading it when the network came online. I replaced it with a loopback relay, so instead of recording me, it captured ambient static and snippets from pre-recorded conversations I generated on a loop, fake arguments, coded nonsense, and just enough tidbits to sound sensitive. I even threw in a few keywords to bait them: intercepted data stream, field asset authorization, black ops. Within hours, the network traffic outside my home tripled. They were biting. The final piece of the trap was the digital honey trap, a server in my basement, heavily encrypted and running a shadow OS that masked itself as a standard personal network hub. Behind the scenes, it operated as a full honeypot environment, loaded with fake NSA documents, operation code names, internal briefings, all custom generated by me to match the linguistic and structural formatting of real top-secret documentation. Everything was fake, but it looked authentic, complete with dummy metadata and watermarked file trails. On a Thursday night, at 2:47 a.m., someone accessed the server. They bypassed the default login screen using a brute force script and got into the mock file system. Exactly what I wanted. What they didn't know was that the moment they broke the encryption layer, they downloaded a beacon packet, a silent, embedded piece of code that pinged me with their device fingerprint, location, network path, and even a snapshot from their device's built-in camera. The face that popped up on my screen? Karen, wearing gloves, hunched over a MacBook, in what looked like her sunroom. I took a screenshot and timestamped everything. Game over. But I wanted a little more. I wanted to catch them physically. So I took a risk. I left the back gate unlocked, and I left a sensitive file open on my laptop screen in full view from the patio door. I turned off the motion lights on purpose and retreated to my surveillance closet, outfitted with multiple feeds and a silent locking mechanism. I waited. At exactly 3:18 a.m., the door creaked. Someone entered. I watched on camera as two individuals stepped into the room, Karen and a younger guy, one of the newer HOA board members, name tag from the last meeting still fresh in my memory, Bryce. Karen whispered, "Just copy the files. We're not stealing, we're monitoring." Bryce plugged in a flash drive. I flipped the switch. The room lights came on. Locking bolts slid into place on every door and window. Speakers played my voice over the intercom. "Smile. You're on camera. Unauthorized access has been logged and sent to federal authorities. Please remain where you are." Karen screamed. Bryce tried to run, only to find the door wouldn't budge. I stepped out of the surveillance room, fully dressed, calm, holding a clipboard of my own. "Good evening," I said. "Hope you're enjoying your little visit." Karen turned pale. "Why, you can't do this. We were just spying." I offered. "Illegally accessing a private residence? Tampering with federal-grade infrastructure." Bryce looked like he was about to cry. "You've committed at least 3 federal crimes tonight," I said. "But the best part? You did it all on camera." I turned the tablet around and showed them the footage, split screen, time-stamped, and already uploaded to a secure server. "I'm giving you exactly 1 hour," I said, "to get a lawyer, pack your things, and prepare for a formal investigation." Karen tried to bluster. "You don't have the authority." I held up my badge. "The real one. NSA Special Projects Division." Her face fell. "Oh," I said casually, "and I've been logging every HOA correspondence, digital footprint, and access attempt since day one." She collapsed into a chair. It was checkmate. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon in the Pinebrook Hollow Community Center, a converted ranch-style building with a room that could barely seat 30, yet somehow was always packed with whispers, cold coffee, and the unmistakable scent of passive aggression. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in khakis and a hoodie like any other neighbor, not because I wanted to blend in, but because I wanted Karen to think, just for a moment longer, that maybe I wasn't about to nuke her entire suburban empire into oblivion. She was already there, seated at the head of the long table, with her clipboard and stack of color-coded notes. Her smile when she saw me was brittle, and behind it was a flicker of fear. She knew something was wrong. Bryce, the younger board member who had helped her break into my house, wasn't there. I assumed he'd taken my advice and gotten as far away from Karen as possible. I took a seat in the back, opened my laptop, and waited. The meeting started like any other, with Karen rolling through an agenda that included hedge height uniformity, lawn chemical policy updates, and a particularly ridiculous complaint about unapproved mailbox art. But I let her have her moment. Because when I stood up during the open comments section, I knew the rest of the meeting was going to be legendary. "Hi," I said, stepping forward. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm redacted. I live at the corner lot on Hemlock and Ridgeview." Karen stiffened. "Over the last few weeks," I continued, "I've been experiencing what I initially assumed were random inconveniences, letters about blinds, notes about garbage bin alignment, and suggestions about community openness. But then things escalated. I noticed surveillance-grade tampering with my home security systems, signs of unauthorized entry into my property, and the presence of electronic devices not installed by me. I even detected unusual behavior in my home network. People started murmuring." Karen spoke up, fake smile in place. "Mr. Last Name, if you've experienced technical issues, I'm sure we could arrange for a local technician." I raised a hand. "I'm not done." I clicked a button on my laptop, and the wall-mounted projector screen behind Karen flickered to life. The first slide showed a time-stamped photo, Karen in my backyard, kneeling near a flower bed, burying a small surveillance device. The room went silent. Next slide, a screenshot of the digital attack on my home network, complete with IP trace routing back to Karen's house. Slide 3, Karen and Bryce breaking into my house at 3:18 a.m., crystal clear night vision footage, audio included. And finally, slide 4, a still of Karen's face lit up by her laptop screen as she accessed the NSA-styled honeypot server I'd left open as bait. "I've logged over 30 unauthorized interactions with my property," I said, voice calm but pointed. "All of them connected to either this woman directly or someone under her direction." Gasps filled the room. Karen stood up, voice shrill. "This is nonsense. He's fabricating this. This is all doctored." I turned to the crowd. I work for the NSA. Dead silence. Karen froze. I pulled my badge from my pocket and held it up. Special Projects Division, Cyber Operations. I've spent the last decade identifying and neutralizing foreign and domestic threats. I've trained federal agents in counter-surveillance, built data forensics tools used by the Department of Defense, and briefed 3 sitting presidents. So no, this footage isn't doctored. It's authenticated, encrypted, and stored on 6 separate servers. And before you ask, yes, copies have already been sent to law enforcement. Karen's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Someone from the board finally spoke up. Steve, the older guy who always looked like he regretted being born every time Karen opened her mouth. Karen, he said quietly, did you really do all this? She didn't answer. I stepped forward again. In addition to what you've just seen, I've uncovered financial irregularities that suggest Karen may have also misused HOA funds for personal purchases related to surveillance equipment. That evidence has also been submitted for audit. Another murmur, this one sharp and jagged. Karen tried to speak again, but I beat her to it. Let me be clear, I said, voice hardening. This isn't about overreach. This is about criminal conduct. Harassment, trespassing, wiretapping, illegal surveillance, fraud. You didn't just cross a line, Karen, you obliterated it. People began standing. Some called out, we need to vote. Others whispered about pressing charges. Karen looked around, panicked, alone, and trembling. You tricked us, she muttered, staring at me. You baited me. No, I said. You watched me. You followed me. You broke into my house. I just gave you the rope. You tied the noose yourself. Steve stood. Motioned to remove Karen Hollings as HOA president, effective immediately. It was seconded so fast it made her flinch. And just like that, the vote was called. Unanimous. She was out. Karen collapsed into her chair, eyes distant, mouth trembling. Enjoy your retirement, I said, walking past her. And get a lawyer. After the meeting, the community center emptied out like someone had pulled the fire alarm. Word of what had happened, Karen's exposure, the NSA reveal, the surveillance evidence, spread through Pinebrook Hollow like wildfire. In a neighborhood where gossip about someone's mailbox color could last weeks, this was the ultimate scandal. By Sunday morning, it was no longer just HOA drama. It was the defining event of the neighborhood's history. Karen's house was dead silent. No lights, no movement. Her pristine pink hydrangeas wilted in the heat while her reputation withered overnight. But the real fun started Monday. Because I wasn't bluffing about the evidence being sent to law enforcement. I had forwarded everything. Network logs, footage, audio files, decrypted packets, forensic screenshots, timestamps, heat maps, to a contact at the Department of Homeland Security's Cybercrimes Task Force. I worked with them before. They didn't take kindly to civilian surveillance abuse, especially when it involved someone with active federal clearance like me. By Tuesday afternoon, 2 black SUVs rolled through Pinebrook Hollow's Iron Gate, quiet as ghosts, and parked directly in front of Karen's house. 2 agents stepped out, wearing windbreakers that made half the neighborhood pretend they weren't watching from behind curtains. Karen didn't answer at first. Then she did. 10 minutes later, she was sitting on her front steps, shaking, her head in her hands, as the agents went inside. I didn't need to watch. I already knew what they were finding. Files, devices, burner phones, signal boosters, illegal surveillance gear, all of it logged, tagged, and mirrored by me. They weren't just seizing gadgets. They were collecting convictions. Within the week, Karen was served with a restraining order, prohibiting her from coming within 200 feet of my property. 3 civil suits were filed, 2 by neighbors who discovered she'd bugged their properties too, and 1 by me, citing criminal trespass, privacy violations, defamation, and attempted digital intrusion. Her legal team, which she could afford, tried to claim it was community monitoring, but every lawyer she hired bailed after seeing my evidence. The local news caught wind. HOA president under investigation for spying on neighbors. Target was NSA analyst, ran in big, bold letters across the 6 o'clock broadcast. The anchor could barely keep a straight face as she read it. Karen became a suburban legend overnight, the kind people whispered about at barbecues and warned new homeowners to avoid. But I wasn't done. I had one last move. I bought the house next to hers. Cash offer. No inspections. Closed in 14 days. She tried to block it. She couldn't. Her HOA privileges had been stripped. Then I converted the new house into a cybersecurity training facility, remote workshops, virtual red team simulations, all legally zoned and backed by the same federal agency she tried to violate. I installed two massive satellite dishes on the roof, facing opposite directions. One wasn't even plugged in. I just liked the way it made her twitch when she opened her blinds. A month later, she moved. Quietly. In the middle of the night. No goodbye. No for sale sign. Just a moving truck and a single handwritten note shoved into my mailbox. You win. I smiled when I read it. Because this wasn't about winning. This was about sending a message. You don't get to spy on people's lives and walk away. You don't get to treat your neighborhood like a surveillance state. You especially don't do that to someone who built the systems you tried to abuse. So now Pinebrook Hollow is quiet again. The new HOA board is elected, rules are fair, the blinds stay closed as long as people want, and no one gives notes about trash bins anymore. As for me, I still live on that corner lot. I still drink my coffee every morning on the porch. And every now and then, I check the network traffic. Just in case. Because you never know when another Karen might try something stupid. And if they do, I'll be waiting.